A small gray cloud just rose above a tiny island in Indonesia. It barely climbed higher than a 10-story building. On any normal day, nobody would care about a puff of smoke that small. But this is not a normal island. This same island already killed hundreds of people once before, in the middle of the night, with no warning at all. No shaking ground, no sirens, no time to run. Just a wall of water that showed up out of nowhere and swallowed entire beaches whole while families slept. And right now, that same island is stirring again. Scientists are watching it every single hour, day and night, because they know something most people scrolling past this story do not. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why a puff of smoke this small has some of the smartest volcano watchers on Earth wide awake in the middle of the night, checking screens and refusing to look away. A tiny cloud with a deadly name. Let's start with the plain facts, because they matter a lot more than the drama. In the Sunda Strait, the narrow strip of water sitting between the islands of Java and Sumatra in Indonesia, there is a young volcano called Anak Krakatau. That name means child of Krakatoa. And yes, that Krakatoa, the one from the history books, the one people still talk about more than 100 years later. We are going to get to that full story soon, and trust me, it is wild. For the last few weeks, this young volcano has been coughing up ash. At first it was small puffs, only reaching about as high as a 10 or 20-story building. If you saw a list ranking the world's biggest eruptions by size, something this small would not even make the list. It would look almost boring next to the giant eruptions other volcanoes are capable of. But here's the twist. Boring does not mean safe. Early this July, the volcano actually erupted for real. A sudden blast sent a thick gray column of ash shooting more than 600 feet into the sky in less than half a minute. Indonesia's volcano watching agency did not shrug this off. They raised the alert level from level 2 all the way up to level 3, out of 4 possible levels total. In their own language, this level is called siaga, which basically means standby, or get ready, something serious could be coming. They also drew a safety circle around the volcano, somewhere between 2 and 3 miles wide, depending on the report, and told everyone nearby, tourists, fishermen, hikers, boat captains, all of them, to stay completely out of it. And the volcano did not stop at one eruption. Since that first blast, it has gone off again and again. By the middle of this month, it had already erupted more than half a dozen separate times this year alone. Officials have said plainly that all of this points to melted rock pushing its way up toward the surface from deep underground. So here is the real question hiding underneath all of this. Why does a volcano puffing out a little ash get this much attention? Plenty of volcanoes around the world do this all the time, and almost nobody notices. What makes this one so different that scientists are treating every single twitch like it might matter? The honest answer has almost nothing to do with the size of the smoke cloud. It has everything to do with what this exact island already did once before, in complete silence, and what it is quietly capable of doing again without a single person seeing it coming. That story is coming up soon, and it involves the ocean itself turning into a weapon almost overnight, with barely any warning at all. Here is something else worth knowing. This volcano did not just start acting up out of nowhere in July. Satellites flying high above the island had actually been picking up warning signs for weeks before that first eruption ever happened. Back in early June, instruments in space noticed a spike in a certain gas leaking out of the volcano, along with a patch of extra heat glowing on the surface where there should not have been one. A few days later, a clear hotspot lit up right inside the crater on infrared cameras. Then, in the middle of June, the ground itself started talking. Small earthquakes, way too tiny for a person standing on the island to ever feel, started firing off one after another. On some days, more than 50 of these tiny quakes rippled through the ground in just 24 hours, way more than the volcano normally produces during a quiet month. Every single one of those clues, on its own, could maybe be explained away as nothing. But all of them showing up together in that order over those same few weeks told a much clearer story. Something was moving underneath that island, and it was moving straight toward the surface. Before we get there, I want to ask you for something small. If stories like this one, the kind that dig past a scary headline and actually explain what is really going on underneath it, are the kind of thing you enjoy watching, go ahead and hit subscribe right now. Not because I need the number to go up for no reason. This volcano is not finished. It could calm down completely over the next few weeks, or it could get a lot louder with almost no warning at all. Either way, I plan to keep tracking it closely, digging through every new report the moment it comes out. If you are already subscribed, you will actually catch that next update the second it happens, instead of finding out 3 days late from some random headline buried in your feed. That right there is the whole reason to stick around. So you are never the last person to know when something changes. Now let's talk about why this particular island is basically built like a trap that keeps resetting itself. The island that keeps rebuilding itself. Here's something most people do not know about Anak Krakatau. It is young, like really young, Geologically speaking, this island is basically a toddler compared to most mountains on Earth. And it has a habit that should worry anyone paying close attention. It keeps falling apart and then quietly rebuilding itself in the exact same dangerous shape over and over again. Back in December of 2018, a big chunk of this volcano's side simply gave way and slid straight into the ocean. Not the whole island, just one side of it, but that alone was enough. That sudden collapse shoved a massive wall of seawater sideways all at once, sending it racing across the strait like a shove from a giant unseen hand. We will get to exactly what happened next in a moment, because it is honestly hard to believe. But here is the part that matters right now, today. After that collapse, the volcano did not just sit there broken. It slowly started building itself right back up, piling fresh volcanic rock on top of the very same crumbled, unstable base that failed before. Picture it like building a sandcastle right at the edge of the beach, exactly where the waves keep crashing in. Now imagine that same wave already knocked that castle flat once. If you just scoop the sand right back into a pile in the exact same spot, in the exact same shape, should anyone really be shocked when it looks shaky all over again? That is basically what this volcano has been doing for years, except instead of sand, it is stacking loose, crumbly volcanic rock on a steep slope that runs from above the waterline straight down into deep ocean. Loose rock piled up like that does not hold together the way solid stone does. Think of the difference between a hill made of solid granite and a mound of loose gravel dumped onto a ramp. The granite holds its shape no matter what. The gravel just sits there quietly, waiting for a reason to slide. A fresh eruption, a burst of melted rock rising underneath, or a bunch of small earthquakes shaking the ground could all be that reason. And because this island's slope keeps going underwater instead of stopping at the shore, when a chunk finally does slide, it does not just plop onto a beach and stop moving. It keeps sliding, straight down beneath the surface, dragging even more loose rock along with it as it goes. All of that happens completely hidden beneath the waves, invisible to anyone just glancing at the island from a passing boat or a drone flying overhead. That hidden underwater slide is the part that actually shoves the ocean out of the way. And that shove is what turns into a wave big enough to wreck a coastline. Now, you might be wondering how scientists can even tell something like this is building up underneath an island when most of the danger is buried under rock and hidden underwater. It actually comes down to a few simple clues, and none of them require a science degree to understand. The first clue is the color of the smoke. When a volcano puffs out smoke that looks white and fluffy, that is mostly just steam, kind of like a boiling kettle letting off pressure. It looks dramatic, but it usually is not a big deal on its own. But when that smoke turns gray or dark, that means actual bits of solid rock are getting blasted up and out along with the steam. And solid rock does not go flying into the air for no reason. Something underneath has to be breaking it apart. That usually means melted rock has pushed close enough to the surface to shatter stone on its way up. The second clue is shaking. Not big earthquakes that knock over furniture, but small ones. So small that most people standing right on the island would never even feel them. Special listening equipment can hear them, though. And here is the key detail. It matters a lot whether that shaking is happening deep down or close to the surface. If it is happening far underground, that usually means melted rock still has a long way to travel before anything visible happens. That is worth watching, but there is likely still plenty of time. But when that shaking starts happening close to the top, close to the crater, close to open air, that tells scientists the action has moved right up near the surface and things could shift a lot faster than before. There's actually one more clue scientists pay close attention to, and it is a little sneakier than the first two. Not every small earthquake under a volcano feels the same to the instruments listening for it. Some come from solid rock cracking apart all at once, kind of like the sharp snap you would hear if you stepped on a dry branch. Others come from gas or hot liquid rock squeezing its way through narrow cracks, more like the low rumble of water forcing its way through a clogged pipe. And sometimes, instead of separate little snaps and rumbles, the whole island just hums with one long, steady vibration that does not stop for hours at a time. None of that requires fancy science words to understand. It basically comes down to this. Scientists are not just counting how many times the ground shakes. They are listening closely to what kind of shake it is, because different kinds point to different things happening underground. And reading them wrong could mean missing the real warning sign hidden inside a whole lot of normal background noise. When you put those clues together, gray smoke, shallow shaking, and the right kind of rumble, all happening at the same time, that is not a coincidence anyone can just brush off. That is a real, measurable sign that this island has stepped up from its usual sleepy background rumble into something worth watching closely every single day. To be fair, none of this guarantees anything huge is about to happen. Gray smoke can fade back to white within days. Small earthquakes can settle down and quiet right back off. Volcanoes tease people all the time, revving up and then stalling out for no obvious reason. Most of the time, nothing dramatic follows at all, But that is exactly why the story of what already happened here once before matters so much, because this island has already proven, in the most painful way possible, exactly what it is capable of when things do not stall out. The wave with no warning. Most of us have been taught the same basic lesson about tsunamis our whole lives. A massive earthquake shakes the ground. That shaking is often violent, sometimes lasting a full minute or even longer. That shaking acts like nature's own alarm bell, and it is the exact signal that has saved countless lives around the world, from the huge tsunami disaster in the Indian Ocean back in 2004 to the one that struck Japan in 2011. The rule that everyone learns growing up is simple enough. If the ground shakes hard near the coast, run to high ground immediately. Do not wait around to see what happens. But on the night of December 22nd, 2018, that alarm bell never rang at all. A large section of Anak Krakatau's side slid into the sea, exactly like the loose, crumbly pile we just talked about. That unstable stack of rock, built up piece by piece over the years, finally gave way. The collapse shoved an enormous wall of water sideways, and it raced outward across the Sunda Strait as a fast-moving wave. Here is the part that makes this whole story so cruel. There was barely any earthquake attached to it at all. No long minute of shaking to warn anyone standing nearby. People near the shore had no reason in the world to think anything was wrong. Nothing rattled the windows. Nothing knocked a single glass off a shelf. And it happened at night, in total darkness. People could not even see the wave racing toward them across the black water until it was already crashing onto the sand right in front of them. To make things even worse, it was the holiday season. Beaches and beachfront hotels on both the Java side and the Sumatra side of the strait were packed with families and tourists out there enjoying the water precisely because it was that time of year when people wanted to be close to the ocean. Fishermen out on the water that night later said the sea just felt wrong in a way they could not explain. But by the time anyone realized what was actually happening, there was no time left to warn the people back on shore. Hotel staff along the beach had no alarm to sound because there was nothing on any screen anywhere telling them a wave was coming. The wave hit without warning, in pitch darkness, straight into crowds of people who had no idea anything was wrong until it was already far too late to move. At least 437 people died that night. More than 14,000 were hurt. Tens of thousands lost their homes in a single instant. On the small islands closest to the volcano itself, the water surged up the land to heights of over 260 feet in some spots, an almost unbelievable number that shows just how close those tiny islands sit to the point of total collapse. Along the more crowded coastlines further away, the waves still reached around 43 feet high, tall enough to flatten entire rows of beachfront buildings. Now, you might hear that and think, well, the waves further away were smaller, so maybe those were not that dangerous. That kind of thinking is exactly backwards, and it is worth slowing down on for a second. A wall of moving water only 3 feet tall carries more than enough force to knock a full-grown adult clean off their feet and pull them straight under. A tsunami is nothing like the wave you picture at a normal beach, the kind that rises up nicely and curls over for surfers to ride. It is the entire ocean itself shoving forward all at once, and it just keeps coming, dragging cars, trees, boats, and whole buildings along with it as it advances. Every single wave that hit that night was several times taller than that deadly 3-foot mark, and every single one of them arrived in complete darkness, with zero announcement beforehand. After that horrible night, people realized something deeply uncomfortable. Every warning system in that entire part of the world had been built around earthquakes, built around the basic assumption that the ground would always shake first, buying everyone a few precious minutes to react. When the wave showed up with practically no earthquake attached to it at all, that whole assumption simply collapsed right along with the coastline. Some people said afterward that they felt nothing at all before the water reached them. Others said they just stood there confused, watching the sea behave strangely with absolutely no idea what it actually meant until it was already crashing over them. That gap, the space between the real danger and the warning systems that were supposed to catch it, is the entire reason today's rumbling gets taken this seriously. This is not a bunch of people panicking over nothing. This is a region that already paid a horrible price once for underestimating this exact mountain. Nobody wants to pay that price a second time. But here is something that might surprise you even more. As terrible as that night in 2018 was, it was not even close to the worst thing this island has ever done. The explosion the whole planet heard. To really understand why scientists treat this island so differently than almost any other volcano on Earth, we have to go back even further, all the way back to August of 1883. Back then, this island was not called Anak Krakatau yet. It was the original Krakatoa, a much bigger mountain sitting in that exact same spot. And in 1883, it exploded in what remains one of the most violent blasts ever recorded in human history. The explosion was so massive that it destroyed roughly 2/3 of the entire mountain in one single event. A huge chunk of it simply collapsed beneath the sea, leaving behind a giant sunken crater carved into the ocean floor. That same sunken crater is the exact spot where today's smaller volcano, Anak Krakatau, has spent the last 100+ years slowly rebuilding itself piece by piece in the ruins of its own parent. The ash column from that 1883 blast shot up somewhere around 50 miles into the sky. Let that number sit for a second. Most passenger airplanes cruise at around 7 miles up. This single eruption threw ash more than 7 times higher than a jet flying at full altitude. The sound of the explosion was heard nearly 3,000 miles away. That is roughly the same as someone in New York hearing a boom go off in the middle of the ocean and mistaking it for cannon fire, because that is exactly what happened to people a similar distance away back in 1883. To this day, it is remembered as one of the loudest sounds ever recorded in human history. The force of the blast was so enormous that it sent pressure waves rippling through the air around the entire planet, multiple times over, showing up clearly on weather instruments as far away as London and Washington, D.C. Scientists who study it today still describe the total energy released as somewhere in the range of a massive nuclear blast, except this one came from the Earth itself, with nobody pulling any trigger. Somewhere around 36,000 people died because of that eruption. And here is the detail that ties this whole story together into one single thread running through everything we have talked about. Almost none of those deaths came from lava, or falling ash, or the raw force of the explosion itself. They came from tsunamis. The biggest waves recorded from that disaster are believed to have reached roughly 135 feet high, tall enough to erase entire towns off the map in minutes. Let that sink in for a second. In 1883, the real killer was water. In 2018, the real killer was water again. Same island, same trap, playing out more than 100 years apart. Now, I want to be fair here, because it is really easy for a story like this to get blown out of proportion online. The 1883 eruption gets ranked at a 6 on the scale scientists use to measure how big an eruption is. Scientists use the word colossal to describe a 6. You will sometimes see people online calling this a supervolcano. That is simply not accurate. A true supereruption sits in a whole different, far bigger category, involving several times more erupted material than what came out of Krakatoa in 1883. As devastating as 1883 truly was, it never reached that extreme level. And honestly, that little correction leads straight to the single most important point buried inside this entire story. This volcano has never actually needed a supereruption to kill huge numbers of people. It did not need one in 1883, and it did not need one again in 2018 either. All it ever needed, both times, was enough of a shove to knock loose rock into the sea. The real danger here was never about raw size. It has always been about water, and how easily this one island can send it crashing onto shore with almost no warning at all. So knowing all of that history, what does it actually mean for today, right now, with this same volcano erupting again? So what happens next? Here is the honest answer, straight from the people whose entire job is watching this mountain around the clock. Nobody knows for certain what happens next. And the scientists closest to the raw data are the very first ones to admit it openly. What they can tell you clearly is exactly what signals they are watching for. They are watching whether the ash clouds keep growing taller and stronger, or whether they start to calm back down on their own. They are watching the shaking underground, tracking whether it grows more frequent and more powerful as the days pass. They are watching for glowing, red-hot rock appearing right at the crater's rim, and for any sign that the ground itself is swelling or bulging outward, which would mean melted rock is physically pushing the whole structure from underneath. And they are watching closely to see whether officials decide to push the alert level even higher than where it already sits. Right now, this month, the alert sits at level 3 out of 4. A safety zone stretches a few miles around the crater, and everyone has been told firmly to stay completely out of it. The volcano keeps erupting on and off, sending ash and chunks of rock into the sky every so often. But nothing on the scale of a full collapse has happened again, at least not yet. It is worth being honest about both sides of this. This is not a moment to panic and assume disaster is guaranteed to strike tomorrow. It is also not a moment to shrug it off and assume everything is totally fine just because nothing huge has happened again so far. This island has already proven, twice in 2 completely different centuries, exactly what it is capable of doing to the people living along its shores. The middle ground here is actually pretty simple. Stay alert. Do not tune this one out completely, but do not spiral into panic either. Since 2018, engineers and scientists have actually tried adding new tools to close that warning gap. Some have set up cameras that watch the volcano nonstop, hoping to spot a collapse the second it starts. Others have looked into sensors that sit on the seafloor itself, listening for the exact kind of vibration a landslide makes as it slides underwater, separate from the vibration of a normal earthquake. None of these tools are perfect yet, and some have failed or gone offline in the past when they were needed most. That is part of why a real live eruption happening right now matters so much. It is a genuine chance to test whether any of these new tools actually work the way they are supposed to under real conditions, instead of just in theory. What makes this moment genuinely worth paying attention to is that it is basically a live test happening in real time. Ever since the 2018 disaster exposed just how unprepared everyone truly was for a wave that arrives with no earthquake warning at all, scientists have been quietly trying to figure out whether shaking ground, rising heat, and shifting smoke can actually give people enough warning before the next collapse happens, instead of only finding out after the fact. Nobody knows yet whether that is even possible for a danger that can move this fast and this quietly. The eruptions happening right now, watched hour by instruments scattered across the island, are effectively answering that exact question as we speak. So here is what you now understand, that most people scrolling past a random headline about a small volcanic cloud never will. This story was never really about the size of the smoke plume. It was always about the island sitting underneath it, the coastlines wrapped around it on both sides, and the two disasters, more than a century apart, that already proved exactly what this mountain is capable of the moment it decides to move again. We are going to keep watching this one closely, because the next real update could land in just a few hours, or it might not show up again for months. If you want to actually catch that update the second it happens, instead of stumbling onto it 3 days late buried in your feed, go ahead and hit subscribe, tap that notification bell, and drop a like on this video so it reaches other people who need to understand this story too. And before you go, I want to ask you something, honestly. If a volcano like this one was rumbling near your own coastline right now, would you actually pack up and leave the moment officials told you to, or would you want to see it with your own eyes first? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you want to go even deeper into other volcanoes that have quietly reshaped human history, check out the video right there on your screen next.